Imagine a small town in 1957, where a 7-year-old girl, Maria Ridolph, disappears without a trace. The case goes cold, but not forgotten. Welcome to Sycamore, Illinois, a quaint town not used to making headlines. It's a close-knit community where children play freely and neighbors know each other by name. In the heart of this town lived a young girl named Maria, but her innocence was short-lived. One fateful day, Maria vanished. Her disappearance sent shockwaves through the town, turning the peaceful community into a hive of fear and confusion. The local police launched an immediate investigation, combing through every nook and cranny of the small town. They interviewed neighbors, friends, and family, but despite their exhaustive efforts, the leads went cold. The case of Maria Ridolph was left unsolved, leaving a haunting question mark hanging over the town. As the years passed, the case faded into the backdrop. Life in Sycamore went on, but the memory of Maria was never far away. Her story was told and retold, a chilling reminder of the town's lost innocence. Parents held their children a little tighter, and the town streets were never quite as safe as they once were. This wasn't just a case file collecting dust in some forgotten drawer. It was an open wound for the community, a tragic tale of a life lost too soon. The disappearance of Maria Ridolph was a chilling mystery that cast a long, dark shadow over the town's history. Little did they know, this case would resurface 55 years later, shattering the peace of the small town once again. Fast forward to 2008, when a dying woman's shocking confession implicates her own son in Maria's disappearance. In the twilight of her life, racked with guilt and the weight of a secret too heavy to bear, this woman revealed her son's sinister connection to the unsolved mystery. Her confession was startling, to say the least. Her voice trembled as she recounted the chilling details from that fateful day in 1957. She claimed her son, then a young man, was the last person seen with Maria. The guilt of her son's actions had been eating away at her for over half a century. The revelation was like a bolt from the blue, causing the forgotten case to resurface. Law enforcement, intrigued by the new lead, decided to reopen the case. With renewed vigor, they started piecing together the puzzle that had baffled them for so long. The accused, now a grown man in his 70s, was identified and questioned. His life, it seemed, had been a tapestry of deception, skillfully woven to conceal his dark past. The more they probed, the more the threads of his life started to unravel. But the path to justice was far from smooth. The passage of time had eroded much of the physical evidence. Key witnesses had passed away, and memories had faded into the recesses of the past. The investigators were left with little more than the confession of a dying woman and the inconsistent stories of the accused. Despite the hurdles, the investigators were determined. They knew they were on the precipice of solving a case that had remained a mystery for over half a century. But the question remained: could they prove beyond reasonable doubt that the accused was indeed guilty? But with little physical evidence, could this startling confession be enough to solve the oldest cold case in history? In a courtroom filled with anticipation, the trial begins. The prosecutors rely heavily on eyewitness identification and informant testimony. The courtroom was a whirlpool of tension, as the oldest cold case ever to be solved was about to unfold. The prosecution stood resolute, armed with a case built on a precarious foundation of eyewitness identification and informant testimony. Physical evidence, the cornerstone of most cases, was noticeably absent. Lost or destroyed over the decades, it was a glaring void in this courtroom drama. The absence of physical evidence was a significant handicap, and the prosecution had their work cut out for them. They had to convince the jury beyond reasonable doubt, based solely on the testimony of individuals. This was no small feat considering the time that had passed. Memories fade, details become hazy, and the human mind is not infallible. Eyewitness identification was a key component in the case, despite its inherent challenges. The reliability of such evidence is often called into question, as the passage of time can distort memory. Yet, the prosecution pushed forward, undeterred. In an unexpected turn of events, an informant's testimony became a critical piece of the puzzle. A dying woman's statement implicated her son in the crime, reopening the case after 55 years. This shocking revelation added a new layer of complexity to the trial. With each passing day, The courtroom drama intensified. The prosecution and defense battled fiercely, each trying to tip the scales of justice in their favor. The stakes were high, and every detail, every statement was scrutinized and dissected. But as the trial progressed, doubts began to surface about the strength of the evidence. Could the court accurately reconstruct history? The question hung in the air, adding to the palpable tension in the room. A question that would soon find an answer, as the trial moved towards its inevitable conclusion. After a tense trial, a verdict was reached, but was it the right one? The air was heavy, the courtroom silent, as the jury delivered their decision, guilty. The defendant, a man implicated by his own mother on her deathbed, was convicted of a crime that had been cold for more than half a century, a crime that had haunted the town of Sycamore, Illinois, since 1957. The verdict sent shockwaves through the community. Some breathed a sigh of relief, believing that justice had finally been served for the innocent 7-year-old victim, Maria Ridolph. Yet others were skeptical. Was this verdict a triumph of justice or a failure of the judicial system? The case against the defendant was built almost entirely on circumstantial evidence. The physical evidence that once existed had been lost or destroyed over the decades. The prosecution's case hinged on eyewitness identification and the testimony of informants. But can memories from 55 years ago be trusted? Can they stand up in court? After the verdict was announced, there were those who celebrated and those who mourned. But there were also those who questioned. Had the court accurately reconstructed history, or had it created a narrative to fit the evidence it had? In the aftermath of the trial, an appeal was filed. The defense argued that the evidence against the defendant was insufficient to convict. They pointed to the lack of physical evidence, the reliance on eyewitness testimony, and the potential for bias in the courtroom. The appeal is still pending, leaving the final resolution of this case hanging in the balance. So, did justice prevail, or was an innocent man convicted? What's your verdict? The question lingers, echoing through the halls of the courthouse, through the streets of Sycamore, and in the hearts of those who remember Maria Ridolph. The oldest cold case ever solved remains in many ways unsolved. The verdict, like the truth, is elusive, a phantom that disappears when you reach out to grasp it. No matter the verdict, the case leaves a lasting impact on the town and the people involved. In the small town of Sycamore, Illinois, the echoes of a tragedy from over half a century ago still resonate. The kidnapping and murder of young Maria Ridolph, a case that lay dormant for decades, left an indelible imprint on the community. The reopening of the case and the subsequent trial stirred up a whirlwind of emotions: fear, anger, sorrow, and ultimately a sense of closure, albeit a controversial one. The accused, now an elderly man, found himself thrust into the spotlight, his every move dissected and judged. The conviction, based largely on eyewitness identification and informant testimony, was a bitter pill for him to swallow. His life, already marked by the secret his mother allegedly took to her deathbed, was forever altered. Yet it wasn't just his life that was impacted. The victim's family, who had lived for years with the agonizing uncertainty of not knowing, found themselves grappling with a different kind of pain. The reopening of the case brought back memories they had tried to bury, and the resolution, while providing some answers, also brought its own set of questions. The community of Sycamore was forever marked by this case. From the residents who remembered the initial shock of the crime to the younger generation who grew up with the story as part of their town's lore, everyone was touched in some way. The case served as a stark reminder of the vulnerability of their peaceful town, and the conviction, no matter how questionable, offered a semblance of justice. But beyond the personal impact, the case also raised broader questions about the justice system. How reliable is eyewitness identification after so many years? Can a court accurately reconstruct history based on such evidence? These questions linger, adding another layer to the haunting legacy of this case. In the end, the oldest cold case ever solved remains a chilling reminder of the past and a testament to the relentless pursuit of justice.